Thank you very much. I wanted to talk today about a topic that is somewhat new. So, this is sort of introductory research material for me. I titled the topic Solidarity, True and False. And it kind of grew out of some thoughts I've had I'd say, since the economic crisis of 2008. It seemed that socialists and progressives have sort of rehabilitated themselves, asserting their ideology essentially by attacking a caricature of the market economy that they call neoliberalism. Of course, basically, they call neoliberalism anything they don't like. I am increasingly frustrated by their identification of some legitimate problems with our current economic system, but attempting to solve these problems by means will only make the social problems worse. And they do so by misidentifying the problems, I think. They desire to fight exploitation and privilege by collectivist solidarity. And solidarity has become sort of a watchword for a number of the people that I'm thinking of. Um, Solidarity is popular amongst left-leaning political activists. A recent book by Leah Hunt Hendricks and Astrid Taylor, titled "Solidarity: The Past, Present, and Future of a World-Changing Idea," argues that solidarists hold that interdependence is a fact of human life and the natural world, and therefore should be the basis of law and policy. Solidarity, they argue, is undermined by a market driven system that encourages people to see others as competitors for resources and to spurn solidarity in favor of self interest. So they see a, a natural dichotomy between solidarity and the market economy. Um, for lasting change, they argue that solidarity requires the cultivation of justice, commitment, courage, and humility, and a conviction that we can remake the world. So they have a very grandiose vision that we can somehow socially engineer things if we just pursue solidarity in the right way. Um, Another important writer on the theme of solidarity is a professor of philosophy at King's College London named Andre Sangiovanni. He argues that solidarity is best understood as a special kind of joint action constituted by a characteristic profile of interpersonal attitudes, norms, dispositions, and behaviors triggered by one's identification with another on the basis of a role, a cause, a way of life, a condition, or a set of experiences. Solidarity names an egalitarian, mutualistic, and cooperative practice among strangers whose aim is to overcome significant forms of adversity in an era when traditional social ties, for example, kinship, guild, or the church, have weakened. And so, as these sort of traditional forms of civil society have weakened, solidarity then through collectivist identities and conditions and group thinking can sort of help mitigate, I guess, the in their eyes destructive, conflict-laden outcomes of the market economy. Um, uh, Sanjivani further recognizes or argues that solidarity requires a recognition that collective action is necessary to overcome adversity. Solidarity, he claims, always aims, that is, to change the order of things. Right. So there is a common theme that runs throughout this literature is that we've got these social problems related to exploitation, and some form of social privilege, and therefore others that are on the low end of the stick, shall we say, the low end of the totem pole. And the response to that, the way to overcome these problems or fight these problems, is to engage in some form of solidarity. Another theme that runs through this literature is that the solidarity is always contrary to the market, that the market does the opposite of promoting solidarity. Because as we've already noted, um, uh, market-driven systems encourages people to see each other as competitors for resources. It encourages people to see each other only as assets that can be used as commodities, and it promotes market-driven market economies. Basically, sort of reward people for acting selfishly and driven by pure self-interest. Um, Along economic lines, we've seen this more particularly in sort of in terms of the, say, specific consequences of the market economy and the market division of labor that sort of embodies the market economy. We have certain people that argue sort of what happens when we don't have solidarity. Herb Thompson, professor of economics at Murdoch University in Perth, Australia, for instance, argues that conflict and in his article "Conflict in the Social Relations of Capitalism," argues rather than seeing conflict as an anomaly of capitalism, it is concluded that conflict is an essential and inherent component of the social relations found in capitalism. So the people that see solidarity as an effective way of combating the negative consequences, perceived negative consequences of the market, see social conflict as an inherent component of capitalism, that capitalism breeds social conflict. Why is this the case? Well, we could look to Mao Zedong in his Little Red Book. One aphorism in that book is simply, quote, "Classes struggle. Some classes triumph and others are eliminated. Such is history. Such is the history of civilization for thousands of years. To interpret history from this viewpoint is historical materialism." Right? So he claims to be following very closely to Marx's vision, knowing that history is the story essentially of the class struggle. Another aphorism from Mao Zedong says that, quote, "In every class society, everyone lives as a member of a particular class, and every kind of thinking, without exception, is stamped with the brand of a class." From this Marxist perspective, this communist perspective, and Mao's perspective, the solidarity that would exist would be a solidarity within one's class, and of course they meant economic class, right? Primarily then the solidarity of the proletariat versus the capitalist bourgeois. But that's not the only way that this manifests itself in our contemporary world. There's also issues of say racial solidarity. The Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture fairly famously a couple of years ago put up this sort of infogram, if you will, entitled "Aspects and Assumptions of Whiteness and White Culture in the United States." And they just listed these characteristics of what whiteness was, and they wanted everybody to be aware of what whiteness is. And so when people talk about what whiteness is, and they'll know what we're talking about, I guess, compared to, I don't know what, blackness or other racial identities. And for example, in terms of aspects of whiteness, they would say emphasis on the scientific method, objective, rational, linear thinking, focusing on cause and effect relationships, quantitative emphasis. That is part of whiteness and white culture. Hard work being the key to success. A heavy value on ownership of goods and space and property, also elements and aspects of whiteness. So there's this idea that there could be a solidarity within certain racial groups, solidarity within certain economic classes, solidarity within different types of sort of lifestyles, if you will. And so there's different margins or dimensions within which people could participate in various solidarities. The political activists that I mentioned at the beginning, Hunt, Hendricks, and Taylor, they emphasize that some forms of solidarity could be negative in the sense of being very narrow and sort of uh, uh, sort of uh, uh, being against inclusivity. They point to, say, white supremacy. It'd be one example of this. Um, but by and large, all forms of the solidarity that is promoted by socialists and progressives um, tend to be emphasizing solidarity within some type of class or class interest. Even when they talk about intersectionality and trying to sort of then provide solidarity amongst different classes, it's still people within self-identifiable classes. And my argument in this presentation is that those people emphasizing solidarity within classes and class interests as a solution for social progress are simply barking up the wrong tree. They, on the one hand, they fail to understand the true basis of solidarity or community. And secondly, they have a misguided understanding of what we struggle against. We don't actually struggle against different classes. The basic struggle, the basic material struggle that we have is our struggle against scarcity and destructive behavior. Those are the things that's where the big struggle lies. And so if we recognize that the world we live in is a world of aggravated scarcity, where we don't have enough means to satisfy all of our ends. And therefore, we may be tempted to engage in destructive behavior in order to satisfy as many ends as we can for ourselves. And that raises the question: how do we promote human flourishing in our human condition? How do we promote human flourishing? How do we be fruitful and multiply? How do we increase productivity? How do we produce for a general good in our present world of scarcity? And this is important. History tells us this is very important. Historically, poverty was the rule, not the exception. We weren't looking around, people weren't looking around just 300 years ago asking themselves, well, gee, why is this society so poor? What's wrong with this society? No, everybody was poor. The big question is, how did we overcome this, or how do we overcome poverty to live in a society of relative abundance, not absolute abundance, because scarcity is still with us, but relative abundance that promotes human flourishing? Well, one of the key answers provided by Austrian economics and emphasized especially by Ludwig von Mises is the market division of labor. The market division of labor is specialization according to efficiency. People specializing in the production of something according to what they are relatively efficient at producing. People specialize according to what they are most efficient at producing, what they're the low-cost producer. If you are the low opportunity cost producer of something, that is the line of production at which you are most efficient. And as everybody participates in production along these lines, as everyone, more and more people specialize according to their efficiency, that maximizes total social output. And so the total productivity of people together in society increase, and that allows for maximization of social consumption. That allows for more people to have more goods that they can use to satisfy their own ends and to provide for the ends of their families. And so there's a great, tremendous social benefit, material social benefit, from the market division of labor. But as Mises notes, the market division of labor also provides a key to a possible solution of the social conflict. And for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to be drawing upon three important works by Mises. One is an article included in his work, Epistemological Problems of Economics. The essay that I'm going to be speaking to or drawing upon is entitled The Task and Scope of the Science of Human Action. Then a couple decades later, Mises wrote an essay entitled The Clash of Group Interests, which is also important. And then I'm going to be drawing significantly from his 1922 work Socialism, which is one of his great one of his four greatest books. And I could be drawing on some of these themes throughout all of his literature, but these are the things I'm going to focus. These are the works I'm going to focus on. And one of the things that Mises emphasized is not only was the market division of labor more productive than, shall we say, direct use production or self-sufficiency, but as Erwin Decker pointed out, the Austrian economists did not see themselves primarily as economists for social engineering. They saw themselves as putting economics to use to promote society. They thought that an important goal of economics was to provide knowledge assisting the development and maintenance of civilization. If you read through Mises's works, you find a lot of discussion about how certain economic institutions, as we adopt certain economic institutions, that allows for, especially say private property, that allows for the flourishing of a market, which allows for the growth and development of civilization. So civilization was very much on their mind. And we see this in the preface to the second English edition of Mises's book, Socialism. He writes, quote, the great ideological conflict of our age must not be confused with the mutual rivalries among the various totalitarian movements. The real issue is not who should run the totalitarian apparatus. The real problem is whether or not socialism should supplant the market economy. It is this subject with which my book details. World conditions have changed considerably since the first edition of my essay was published, but all these disastrous wars and revolutions, heinous mass murders, and frightful catastrophes have not affected the main issue, the desperate struggle of lovers of freedom, prosperity, and civilization against the rising tide of totalitarian barbarism. In his last great book, Theory and History, that was published in the 1950s, Mises wrote that material well-being is the indispensable condition of a nation's moral, intellectual, and artistic achievement. And so Mises saw a link between material prosperity and our ability to participate in cultural development and cultural flourishing. In socialism, for instance, Mises writes that modern man is a social being, not only as one whose material needs could not be supplied in isolation, but also as one who has achieved a development of reason and of the perceptive faculty that would have been impossible except within society. Man is inconceivable as an isolated being, for humanity exists only as a social phenomenon, and mankind transcended the stage of animality only insofar as cooperation evolved the social relationships between the individuals. Now, I find that passage is fascinating because it seems to me, that if you take that just out of context and you pull that out of Mises and nobody knew who wrote it, that could be something that you would find in one of these other books promoting solidarity from a collectivist position. But Mises, even though he notes that humanity exists only as a social phenomena, that it is man you cannot conceive of man apart from his living in social relations. Mises sees the cause of that very differently, and the way we truly live in solidarity or in community, in society, I should say, very differently than the solidarists. And we see this in further in his work, The Task and Scope of the Science of Human Action in Epistemological Problems of Economics, where he notes that the theory of the division of labor demonstrates that there is no irreconcilable conflict between the interests of society and those of the individual, or between the individual and various social classes. In isolation, the individual cannot attain his ends, whatever they may be, or at least not to the same extent as by social cooperation. Right? There are a number of things that we simply cannot produce by ourselves. We need to engage in joint production. And then even if there are things that we can produce by ourselves as individual producers, we all benefit if we are able to specialize according to efficiency and participate in the division of labor. So Mises perceives the division of labor and social cooperation as the way people can enjoy more economic prosperity. And so individual people perceive that the division of labor and social cooperation is beneficial for themselves, right? And so the sacrifices a person makes for the maintenance of social cooperation are therefore, he would say, only temporary, right? A sacrifice would be refraining from stealing and honoring the right to property. That could be a sacrifice for somebody. Instead of just reaching out and grabbing or taking from somebody else when you have superior force, you make a sacrifice and you agree to abide by the right to property. And that will be a sacrifice, but it's only temporary. It's a renunciation of a momentary benefit by political or criminal means for the sake of a long-run enduring advantage that the division of labor expands. Right? And so Mises argues that society comes into being and develops through the action of individuals cooperating in the attainment of ends that they severally aim at independently in order to take advantage of the higher productivity brought about by the division of labor. And therefore, every individual benefits from the existence of society. And no one would be better off as a quote, freebooting individual in an imaginary state of isolation, searching for food on his own and engaged in the war of all against all, compared to being a member of society, even though feeling more constrained or circumscribed at various points. So in a market division of labor, everyone, in acting to improve their own standard of living, serves others and helps them to increase their standard of living. So the market division of labor provides a potential key to resolving the so-called the sort of social conflict that the solidarists assume is part of the natural state of life, and particularly the state of affairs in a market economy. Mises comments further on this in his essay, The Clash of Group Interests, where he refutes the claim that the natural state of intergroup relations is one of conflict. And he notes that there are various forms of supposed conflict, right? There's the Marxist perspective on this, where we have economic classes, the proletariats versus the capitalists. We have identity politics, right, where we have classes based on race or sex or sexual identity and or lifestyle. All of them, it turns out, all these different identity, these groups pursuing identity politics somehow find the roots of all evil in capitalism. What did Mises make of this? Well, he claims, or he notes, by the way, that the claim of irreconcilable social conflict is helped upon by what he calls polylogism, right? Polylogism is a theory of so-called sociology of knowledge that claims that the logical structure of the mind is different for different social classes. This polylogism, then, is not the idea that different people from different backgrounds or groups or classes have different opinions about right or wrong, or different opinions or understandings about what would be a good means or a bad means. No, polylogism is the idea that these different classes have completely different logical structures. In other words, they don't even think the same way using the same type of logic. And it's really this type of theory that spawned this ocean of critical theory that we're swimming in now. As Mises notes, if this is correct, if polylogism is correct, the case for peaceful human cooperation is indeed hopeless. If the members of the various groups are not even in a position to agree with regard to mathematical and physical theorems and biological problems, they will certainly never find a pattern for a smoothly functioning social organization. So that begs the question, what integrates these groups in conflict? Well, he notes that in a caste system, society is divided into rigid castes or classes. There is a solidarity of interest among all class members and a conflict of interest among the various castes. Each privileged caste aims at the attainment of new privileges and at the preservation of the old ones. Each underprivileged caste aims at the abolition of its disqualifications. And within a caste society, there is an irreconcilable antagonism between the interests of the various castes. In a free society, however, we have equality under the law instead of a caste system. So there are no official privileges due to anyone's identity. Right? There's no benefits, legal benefits, just because you happen to be a capitalist, or you happen to be white, or you happen to be Presbyterian or whatever. No, there are no official privileges due to anyone's identity. Now, in the short run, people may be competitors, right? And in a market economy, it's important to recognize that the proletariat does not compete against the capitalist. The worker does not compete against capitalists. In the free market, the worker competes against workers. Producers produce against producers. Colleges compete against other colleges, right? So in the short run, people may be competitors, but they have a common long-run interest in maintaining the market division of labor, and that's Mises's main point. Our present age that we live in is full of serious conflicts of economic group interests, but these conflicts are not inherent in the operation of an unhampered capitalist economy. No, they are the necessary outcome of government policies interfering with the operation of the market. They are not conflicts of Marxian or identitarian classes. They're brought about by the fact that mankind has gone back to group privileges and thereby to a new caste system. So to seek to organize society, Mises says in Socialism, is just as crazy as would be to tear a living plant to bits in order to make a new one out of dead parts. Collective movements are doomed to failure because an collectivist organization of mankind can only be conceived after the living social organism or society has been killed. To make collectivism a fact, one must actually kill natural social life, then build up this collectivist state. That's why socialists and progressives are quite logical in wishing to dissolve all traditional social ties and to destroy the social edifice built up through countless centuries in order to erect a new structure on the ruins that they want to smash. In conclusion, therefore, we could say that contrary to erroneous views of socialists and progressives, the market division of labor does not breed social conflict between atomistic, selfish individuals or even economic classes. In fact, the division of labor brings people together in society. The division of labor makes people dependent on one another. In a market division of labor, people serve their own good only by promoting the good of other people. And therefore, the market division of labor promotes general economic progress and increases in the general standard of living. And that allows for longer, more healthy lives. It allows for the leisure time necessary for the development of culture, and therefore general human flourishing. And with that, I'll take questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and kick off the questions here by just asking, how is it, do you think we could practically try to kind of convert and pull people out of these Marxist ways of thinking? I ask sort of with the idea of, I saw a lot of these sort of sentiments really bubbling up on like social media recently after the United Healthcare CEO assassination, everything. So I'm just kind of curious what your opinions on ways we can kind of relay these ideas and this message to people to get people out of these patterns of thinking.
I would say that a good strategy would be to be as sympathetic as truth allows. So if if people, so a lot of times I think people are driven to the wrong answers because they don't they recognize a problem that is real, but they don't know the solutions. And now there, and of course there are people in power that are happy to provide them with bad solutions. But so just so the common person, I think it's important to be sympathetic with recognizing that there are these social problems, right? For instance, in healthcare, our healthcare system is not, we should not say, oh, our healthcare system is the greatest in the world because it's a free market system. It's not a free market system. And therefore, surprise, surprise, there are a number of problems in our healthcare system. So we should be honest about that. And then, so in some sense, develop some common ground there, and then try to very patiently walk them through why these problems exist because of government privilege and the institutional arrangement that we find ourselves in that is not a free market. And so, in some sense, try to help them see that a lot of the problems are not due to too much market, it's due to cronyism, and how an actual market would not allow for a lot of cronyist activities that does exist. A lot of cronyist activity does exist. The market would not allow for it, and try to help them to see how, if we would have if we could move our institutions and our policies more towards an actual free market, unhampered market, then there would be a much greater entrepreneurial activity that would allow for speaking to the desires and the needs for various goods that people desire.
All right, one last question here before we let you go. I asked Jeff Dice up here at the top of the conference what he thought we could expect from a Trump presidency. I'll relay the same question to you. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Maybe somewhere in the middle. What do you think the next 4 years have in store for us?
Oh, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that Trump's first administration was a mixed bag, and I think that this administration is going to be a mixed bag too. I think that probably in some sense the more positive, I think, his more positive aspects of his program he does seem to be one who favors deregulation, and I think so. I think that's a good thing. I think though, two big policy disasters over the last 20 years, at least longer than that really, but really seem to get ramped up in the last 20 years, is government spending and uh, Fed inflation. And it doesn't seem that Trump has any desire to seriously curb either one of these things. I mean, maybe he created this Doge, but trying to be quote unquote more efficient by squeezing out waste. That doesn't speak to the real problems of massive increase in government spending, and then uh, if it Powell was his appointment. Now, of course, he said later he regretted it. Well, fine. A lot's gonna. We'll find out a lot based on who he may nominate to be Fed chairman. But I'm not. I don't know. I'm not overly optimistic. I think that Trump is an excellent politician, and so he knows what to say. He knew what to say to get him elected, and he knew who he was speaking to. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens. Now I will say this: if he has a better foreign policy that's not as interventionist, and so there actually would be a reduction, shall we say, in military activity overseas, that would go a long way to benefiting. What should one say? Will go a long way to promoting better economic outcomes. But I don't know. I'm not overly optimistic, but I'm not absolutely pessimistic either.
All right. Well, that being said, thank you very much for coming on here with us today. Where can people find you at, and do you have anything to promote?
Oh, well, my most recent book you mentioned, Economics of Prosperity, Rethinking Economic Growth and Development, published by Elgar, is my most recent book. Um, I don't really have another fixed project that I'm focusing on at present. I teach at Grove City College, where we will be beginning a Master's of Economics in 2005. So that's something to look for. I do work at the Mises Institute. I haven't written an essay for them in a while, but I lecture at their events. So you can find me at Mises.org. Find me at gcc.edu. I do have a blog called Foundations of Economics, but I don't contribute to that as regularly as I used to.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We much appreciate it.
Thank you.